So welcome back, and next up is Ferry Grijpink, senior partner at McKinsey, and he's going to share with us how boardrooms talk about Internet of Things.
Hi, my name is Ferry Grijpink. I'm a senior partner for McKinsey based in Amsterdam. McKinsey strategic consulting firms that help a lot of clients in the telco, high tech, but also banking and financial service industries. For McKinsey, I lead our Center for Advanced Connectivity. That's where we combine all the knowledge we have about connectivity technology, such as LoRa, but also 5G or Wi-Fi 6, and how this impacts other sectors like oil and gas, retail, manufacturing. Last year, we published a report on how connectivity technologies influence other industries, and we actually found that there's about $6 trillion of value to be created with these new technologies in 2035. So we're actually pretty excited about this space. However, we've been there before. We looked at the IoT market specifically 5 years ago, and we now look back, we actually overestimated the market by 20%. So what I would like to do with you today is three things. Just want to look back on our predictions 5 years ago and why things have materialized slower than we expected. Then share a little bit some advice for IoT suppliers, IoT customers, and policymakers. And last, I want to look a little bit forward and share a little bit what kind of industries we're most excited about. So to start off with, let's look a little bit back. In 2015, we published a large report where we showed there was about 4 to 11 trillion of value being created by IoT in 2025. We looked at hundreds of use cases, really talked with clients, talked with technology companies, talked to universities to see how this would play out. If we now look back 5 years later in 2020, we basically see that the number on the top end has dropped by about 20 to 25%. The low end, we actually stays the same. Now what happened? And what happened is actually that some things have turned out better than we expected. For example, the value creation perception from decision makers is actually much higher. So people really believe in IoT. And therefore we see decision makers actually driving pilots and try to create the value. On the neutral side, we see actually that the technology, the power performance, and the public policy are roughly where we expect it to be. So what is holding us up? Well, let me name three things for you. The first one is there's some practical issues around installation, the interoperability between devices, and the cost of capability. And there we actually see that making things easier to install, making sure you have to rely on less in the value chain to make things happen would really help. Secondly, we actually see a lot of clients being worried about cybersecurity and privacy. And working through these challenges took longer than we expected. And what we see is people are quite scared, and clients are quite scared to scale when these things are not resolved. But most importantly, the biggest problem we saw is actually the human factor. And what do we mean by it? Change management is so incredibly important if you want to scale your IoT value creation. For example, we worked with a large chemical company, and we basically created IoT solutions, and we started doing meter reading electronically. That led actually to 10 times more alarms. Now, how do you create an operating system that can deal with it is quite important. So we needed the real value unlock was changing that operating model. So that's the reason, mostly why the market has been a bit slow. The good news, of course, that the value perception is incredibly high, and therefore we are pretty confident that the future will be great. What we saw is that these challenges also played out differently in different settings. For example, smart cities have played out very well, where, for example, we see high adoption, we see high value capture, and very high demand by policymakers, because they help with green solution, they help to resolve citizen issues. While, for example, in areas like the human setting, as we call it, which are hospitals, we see much lower adoption and take much more time to work through. Now going to the second area, what can IoT suppliers, IoT customers, and policymakers learn from the last 5 years? I think number one is, as if you're a supplier, you have to all the time think, what can I do to make sure scale is easy? All the reasons not to scale need to be taken away. From make sure that things are multi-use cases, to make sure that things are easy to install, that the cyber and privacy security issues are resolved, incredibly important. Do not think that once you solve the POC, you're done, but really help the client to show value and help them to scale. Now, secondly, for IoT customers, again, when you start an IoT journey, start with scale in mind. What we see mostly is you can only create a good business case when you do multi-use case. So therefore, make sure that you can, your business case and your stack is built in such a way that you can add use cases to it. Again, when we talked about the chemical plant we worked at, it was not just meter reading, it was also safety, it was also asset tracking. Really make sure that you got all the use cases involved. The last thing there is, like I said in the beginning, make sure that you take the people all along with you. How do you make sure the change management needed to create the value is there? And last, around policymakers, I think it's very helpful if you're in a policy role to make sure that interoperability is guaranteed. Make sure there's clear standard per sectors and promote them. But also create clarity about the privacy and security expectations. So, customers dare to go and don't feel that they're exposed. Last, let's look forward. And, when we did our research last year, we found that 80% of the value can already be captured by today's technology. So out of the 6 trillion we see by 2030, 80% can be achieved today with things like LoRaWAN. So with so much value to be captured, I think we all need to hunt for value. We believe manufacturing, oil and gas are very exciting sectors like retail. But one which stands out at this point of time is, for example, agriculture. We just worked with a client where they implemented relatively simple solutions like counting the number of insects in the field. And the interesting part there is it's just not only good for money because you save fertilizer, you save pesticide, but it's also good for the planet because you got higher yields, you got less chemicals in the field, and therefore it overall is much more value creating for the world. I hope you guys have a great conference. I hope these insights are useful. A lot of the documents I mentioned you can download from www.mckinsey.com or find me on Twitter. Thank you.